Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. Welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. I'll just read out Chair's announcements first, as usual. I'd like to inform everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and broadcast live on the internet and will be available for repeat viewing on the Council's website. You should be aware that the Council is a data controller under the Data Protection Act. Data collected during a webcast will be retained in accordance with the Council's published policy. The seating in the public gallery will not be filmed. Members of the public who are able to speak and are only able to speak if they have registered their interest in accordance with the Council's procedure rules. As Chair, I have the discretion to adjourn the meeting in the event that there is disorderly conduct from the councillors or members of the public. I'm sure that won't happen, and that's in accordance with Standing Order 34 and 35. I can also terminate or suspend webcasting of the meeting in accordance with the webcasting protocol. Every time I do that, it's a slightly different script, but never mind. Are we happy to start now then, and are people happy with the minutes of the last meeting at the end of July? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Thank you. And there are no questions from either members of the public or councillors, which takes us on to item 4 on page 13, which is the report on site visits, and Richard Etoff is going to introduce this. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Possible site visits on page 15. Officers are recommending application 231041, which is the residential development on Portman Road, for an unaccompanied site visit and a briefing note. 230745 on your list there is Great Brigham's Mead, application for roof extensions for an apart hotel. We are suggesting a full pack site visit with video for that one. On to page 16 for the previously agreed site visits. 220409 Caversham Park, that took place on the 31st of August. 230613 Amethyst Lane, I'm afraid, is not ready, so there's no projected pack date, and we will programme that one as appropriate. 230612 Dwyer Road, that one's not ready either. We're also going to try and arrange a sort of high-level view from the nearby flats on Burfield Road for you on that one. And one has slipped off the bottom of the list, I'm afraid. That's the Curzon Club, 221345. That one we're proposing to bring to next pack in October, so unaccompanied briefing note should be sent out to you next week. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions or comments on what we've been told, or has anybody got any other site visit they'd like to suggest? Not seeing anybody, so we agree that, and hopefully get the Curzon Club note next week. Thank you very much. Which takes us on to the planning appeals on page 17.
I don't think we have anything to add from officers. Thank you, Chair.
Has anybody got any comment or question about any of that? No, thank you. Which then takes us on to applications for prior approval on page 21. Anything to add?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, so anybody got any comment on any of that? No? Note that then, thank you. And then we come to the local listing of Reading Bridge, and I believe that Mark Warren is here to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report relates to the nomination of Reading Bridge for addition to the list of locally important buildings. The nomination was made to coincide with the centenary of Reading Bridge this year. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Reading Bridge, so I won't give too much background on that, but it's the second vehicular bridge over the Thames to connect Reading and Caversham after the original Caversham Bridge. So The report outlines the significance in terms of the set criteria as set out in the local plan for local listing. And in summary, the particular significance of the bridge is based on the system of reinforced concrete that was used for its construction and with its association with the expansion of Reading in 1911 to incorporate the former urban district of Caversham. And that's clearly of great significance in the development of Reading. So the recommendation is therefore that Reading Bridge be added to the local list.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I'm very pleased to see this has come to this meeting just before the 100th anniversary birthday of the bridge, which is in October. So it's a very apt time that we can sort of celebrate this structure, which is much underrated. A much underrated feature of Reading, not underrated by me nor Evelyn Williams, who's here this evening, and plenty of other people actually. It's not only is it very impressive in its materials and in its structure, and it was quite innovative in its construction at the time. It's including the Art Deco features, which are there, you can see on there today, particularly the lamps. It's, as was mentioned, the history of the bridge is very much entwined with the history of 20th century Reading, in that the construction was part of the deal that brought Caversham into the borough in 1911, which is very much the it was a very unpopular move as far as Caversham was concerned, but there are several sort of things that the people of Caversham got out of it. Was the replacement of the clappers, which is a very dangerous river crossing at this point, and replacement with two lovely bridges, of which this was the first one. And the other interesting story, which is written in the report, is the discussion about John Wesley Martin, who was the chairman of the Borough Extension Committee at the time. Previously had been mayor 3 times, and then just after the opening of the bridge was sent to prison. Not because he opened the bridge when he shouldn't have done or anything, but to do with his financial dealing in his solicitor's firm. There's a fascinating story, and I don't think that I've never heard of any other Reading mayors who have been in prison. Let's hope it stays like that. Yeah. So great to see this structure appreciated. I could go on and on, but I think I've said enough, and I totally support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Oh, Mickey, beg your pardon. Sorry,
yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to say a comment, but I thought I was having a flick through the papers and I saw a photograph of some of the navvies, as they used to be called, where they were the ones that built the canals, weren't they, on shutterers, and it said that unemployment was quite high in those days. So we had, in effect, one of the bosses ended up going to prison, and then we had the unemployed people, and it says that 60% of the local wages were paid for by Unemployed Grants Committee. So it's good to see that business is still looking for cheap labour and grants to help build things, and nothing ever changes really, does it? Thank you, Chair. I am pleased on the whole with the local listing. Thank you.
Can't see anybody else. So can I see your words in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. That's unanimous. Which takes us on to the item 8, consultation on changes to planning permitted development rights. And Julie, want to introduce this? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So when the paper was presented to your main agenda, we hadn't had time to conclude what our responses should be to the answers. The consultation is seeking responses to 88 questions involving a range of suggested changes to permitted development rights for agricultural buildings, industrial buildings, and other commercial buildings, mainly to residential use, but there are some other things scattered in amongst the consultations. We have now had time, officers have had time to look at the questions and propose what our responses shall be. So in your update pack, there is the list of questions, but with our responses or proposed responses to them. Generally, apart from question 1, which is the idea of using design codes to support prior approval applications, we are saying that that would be a good idea to give local communities greater control over the design. and also the final question, which was in the list in your appendix, which is about the allowing extended time for markets, open air markets. We agreed with that. All of the other questions regarding enlarging the amount of floor space that can be converted to residential and other relaxations similar to that, we are saying no. Basically, we're saying no change to what we do now, and basically our reasoning behind that is that, well, where you're proposing new residential development, it really should be subject to consideration against criteria and public consultation, so that we can make sure we get the right properties, the right dwellings in the right place. And so that's our officer's recommended response to the government, but open to hear what councillors have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hornsby-Smith, I think you're indicating, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I wanted to welcome the responses in particular to questions 3 and questions 4. It seems to me that 3,000 square metres is a huge site. It's the size of a large supermarket, to allow it to just change into residential without any control that the local authority would have in terms of the housing mix and the type of housing that's provided. So I welcome the idea that we should not make that even more flexible than it is. So I welcome that. And on question 4, this idea that the removal of the 3-month rule, that if an employment site becomes vacant, you can convert it without having to wait 3 months. That undermines, I think, the whole purpose of the local plan and the zonal strategy that we've got. So I think at least 3 months allows possible reuse of other employers to come into such a site as that. So I welcome both of those responses. I haven't been able to get into the detail of the other ones, but I think for me, those were the 2 key issues that came out from this. And I think we're right to say no on both of those. So thank you.
Councillor Williams, I think you were indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I just want briefly. It feels as though these changes could, down the line, have a significant impact on residents in Reading and future residents, and it has a sense of being rushed. We have only a couple of weeks left to respond. The government doesn't seem to be allowing local authorities the time to properly consider these. I think it's great that officers got these draft responses to us as a committee, and it's great that they can work through those with yourself, Chair, and presumably and with the lead member. But I see these as being significant, and I see the government doing significant consultations on the fly. Anyway, I'm happy to trust officers and yourself, Chair, to finalise these. A couple of elements did make me raise an eyebrow. I'm not sure that I'm as convinced that betting offices and loan shops, contribute to the diversity of a centre, and that amusement arcades and casinos bring vibrancy to centres. But in the end, it's Reading that needs to keep control of that through the local plan, rather than the government take away control and make those into PD. So thank you for bringing these. My one request is, could we see the final submission just copied to PAC members when it goes in? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, of course, Councillor Williams. I'm sure that will happen. Yeah, it's just I'll take on board what Councillor Hornsby-Smith said. And when we first got I've been discussing this with officers over the past couple of weeks, I think. Yeah, I did actually. Yeah, and I thought when we got the first copy, there was no officer comments. I thought, crikey, they've thrown it at the committee. And I thought, that's going to be quite an interesting debate and some interesting answers. Definition of a horse is a cow designed by a committee or something like that. So it came up. No, it's all good. And Councillor Williams says it will affect us in the future. Personally, I don't think these will come to fruition. I think this is politics. This isn't government policy. This is government politics for Michael Gove. But where it has impact is, of course, our Article 4, which officers have put in. Officer Warrenham has put in some fantastic work. You know, if these are implemented, that already makes that Article 4 and the evidence that went behind it and the putting together of that Article 4 in effect out of date. So yes, there are, you know, I can see the benefits of some forms of permitted developments, with the market stalls, the extending of the market, sorry, and in particular farming building, agricultural building to turn them into residential. I think that can work quite well. So that's about it, summing up from me, Chair. Anyway, all councillors can contact me as lead and officers, and as we say, the final draft, which is, we did have very short notice, didn't we? Put it together. And yes, thank you, Chair. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick chance to look through the responses, and I agree with officers on the vast majority of these. In fact, I think apart from question 1 and question 61, I don't see the need for most of these to change at all, I think, as you agree. So it's a bit of a nonsense sandwich. I want to say a ruder word, but I won't. But I think definitely the local design codes is that's a good thing. And I think the markets, especially Reading, definitely benefits from having markets of all shapes, sizes and types and serving different things. I think that will be a real benefit to us because I feel they've improved and increased a lot over the last few years. But apart from that, I think, as Councillor Williams said and Councillor Leng has said as well, is that we need to keep the control to Reading and the consultation rights of Reading residents. So I don't want to increase the power of permitted development rights any more than we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Are you indicating again?
No, apologies, Chair.
You're waving, right? Right, I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. Oh, sorry, Julie, do you want to come back on any of that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of the timescale of the consultation, it came out on the 25th of July, so they've given the standard time that they need responses on. My point was in the report that coming out when it did, when staff were about to go on leave and all that sort of thing, just caught us sort of scrabbling around to try and get a report done and also to come up with responses for you. So in that sense, it wasn't rushed in their way, but I think the timing could have been better. In terms of the delegation, so I've asked if it's okay if officers carry on talking to the chair and lead council about the responses, but I'm getting from the meeting that there seems to be consensus in our responses that we've already provided to you today. So just to save time and, you know, would members be happy for the responses provided to be the ones that we submit to government?
But so if you just copy it to Councillor Leng and the Vice Chair, Councillor Yeo and myself, and then we can send a copy of the final submission round to the rest of the committee, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Oh.
I think Julie was saying that this would be.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm suggesting that because I haven't heard anyone come up with alternative responses to the questions, and as I say, I think as officers we feel that we've given the responses that we are comfortable with. So I'm happy to sort of now there may be pause. We don't need to submit this till the 25th of September. So perhaps rather than us convene, if you want to maybe take a couple of weeks to come back to us to confirm that you're happy with this, then we can, you know, rather than rehash them or anything.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think that was the understanding that we were going to go ahead. And I'd also like to add, sometimes don't know is the best answer you can give, and probably the most honest one sometimes. So I use it quite a lot. So there you go. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. So I don't think anybody's come up with anything alternative, have they? So, okay, thank you very much indeed for that. And yeah, why do they do these things over summer? One can only speculate, can't they? So, right, so it takes us on to the planning applications to be considered, and we don't have any public speaking tonight, which is unusual. So we go straight on to item 9, which is ironically after what was just being said, it's the change of use for 104, 105 Friar Street from a vacant Class E unit to an adult gaming centre. And Richard, you're going to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. There is no update report for this item. This is an application for the change of use from a Class E former retail unit on Friar Street to an adult gaming centre. This is within the sui generis, i.e. unique use class. The officer report concludes that there are no policy objections to the change of use, with the gaming centre fulfilling a retail type use within the primary shopping frontage of Friar Street. Further, from the studies conducted, officers agree that there are no amenity issues to the nearest affected residential properties or the student flats which are nearby and opposite. For members' information, a licence was approved in July at Licensing Committee, though I understand the final copy has not yet been issued to the applicant. The applicant has been in touch with me this evening to advise that it takes some time apparently to issue licenses. This is completely normal. However, they've got to a stage of agreement with the licensing authority about the conditions of the license, and there are 9 conditions. Conditions 1 and 2 of the license relate to CCTV, and you'll note that in the officer report there's a security strategy mentioned for a recommended condition. Just in summary, on the license then, conditions 1 and 2, the first one is about having CCTV, having recording equipment, keeping the recordings, that kind of stuff. And condition 2 is signs shall be placed in prominent positions on the premises, notifying customers that CCTV is in operation. So on reflection, the condition for the proposed security strategy incorporating CCTV would seem to be a duplication of the licensing conditions. This would fail the test for planning conditions as set out in planning practice guidance from the government. We're also aware that there are street cameras in the locality as well. Therefore, officers would suggest deleting the condition, but making it an informative to remind the applicant about the requirement for CCTV and signs which are within their licence. So to summarise, the officer recommendation remains to approve, with the recommendation slightly altered to remove the CCTV condition and add an informative. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd like to thank Mr. Atoff for his presentation on this. And Abbey Ward councillors called this forward and also spoke with licensing in regards to this application. This is obviously a planning committee meeting this evening, so I'll speak to it purely in planning terms. The reasons that we brought it forward, I believe have been somewhat addressed in the report, but the reality is not changed for us through the discovery of the report that there is a possible clustering going on here in an area of the town center. And as to whether that has been properly and thoroughly addressed through mostly through our policy, our CR4 policy, especially regarding around sections 5.3.14 and 5.3.13, I believe, in particular, that what we need to have is a diversity in the town center. And what is also discussed in the report in regards to section 5.3.14 is to talk about the diversity of the leisure offer. Adult gaming centers are a perfectly legal and welcomed part of the economy. They feed well into the nighttime economy in many circumstances, and so that's something that's certainly accepted. What my concern is that the local plan, when it was written, and it is under review now, listed as in section 7.4, the possible opportunities that could be used as being A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, etc., which have all been come down to E or sui generis now. But some of those diverse uses that the local plan laid out in the original format was for these units to possibly be a shop, to be a financial or professional service, a cafe or restaurant, which apparently this site was until March of 2023, a pub, wine bar, drinking establishment, takeaway, hotel, clinics, schools, public libraries, the list goes on of all of those things that this site could have been. As everyone knows, we are rapidly developing. I don't think you can not see that going on in the Station Hill area. We are bringing in a great number of homes into that area, and soon this will be a gateway straight from the station into our town center. And so those in that mix, we also have families. We've encouraged 3-bedroom flats, things like that. So we've encouraged families to come and live in this town center. So again, when that comes back to that situation, we need those shops, those cafes, those takeaways, all of those different leisure and cultural activities to be in good and diverse use within the town center. My concern with this, and with a new gaming site having been approved over at 9 West Street in 2021, is that we are developing within about a quarter of a kilometer. We would have then 4 gaming centers and a betting shop, along with pubs and some takeaways. So it seems to be that there is a bit of a clustering here. And so I would like to possibly defer this, because I feel that within our CR4 policy, we are talking about diverse uses within the town center. And I would like to be able to better understand whether what we've got is an actual clustering going on here or not, and how that could be better explained. Again, if this site were to be in a different location, I would say even further down Friar Street or somewhere else in the area, I don't think it would be that much, that prevalent or that obvious. But within a quarter of a mile, you would be coming up on all these adult gaming centers. And so that's my concern with this. I'd also like to understand from officers, since the cafe closed down in March 2023, was there an active search for any of these other uses which this site could be? So my concern and my reason for asking a deferment on this is based solely on the fact that have we got too many of these sites within one small area, and I would like further explanation in relation to that policy as to whether that's actually what's going on or not. Thank you, Chair.
If we're not going to discuss it tonight, then we just need to vote on whether there is a deferral, and then we can have the discussion next time with that additional information. So can I see all those in favour of a deferral? Thank you. That is unanimous, I think. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Takes us on to the next report on page 69, which is well, it's listed as Oxford Road, but I think most of the view that we've been looking at is from Howard Street. It's the old Reading Community Welfare Rights Unit parking area. So I believe Steve Viger, you're going to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, full planning permission and listed building consent to sought for the erection of a 3-bedroom dwelling on an area currently used as a paved car park to the rear of 101 Oxford Road, which is a Grade 2 listed building. The wall is also listed by virtue of the fact, the boundary wall, I should say, which runs around the perimeter of the frontage on Howard Street. That's also listed by virtue of the fact it's attached to the listed building. And as the chair says, this is very much sort of fronting onto Howard Street, and that's very much sort of the environment within which it will be experienced. Both applications are recommended for approval, as set out on pages 69 and 70 of the main agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, an Abbey Ward application, and something as a heritage champion I take a particular interest in. And this is an application that is for increasing the built environment within the curtilage of a listed building within a conservation area that does happen to be at risk. It is a very, very challenging site, but it is a very unique and special building at 101 Oxford Road. The curtilage of that property extends clear back. As you know, the proposed structure that's being added to that goes to the back of that property. But I think it's really important for us to understand, and that is where heritage is so important, and understanding heritage is so important, to understand exactly why and how that plot was developed. So I went back with the assistance of a good friend and did some research on the property today and looked at the property in 1853 and also 1875. In 1853, the property had a small, probably an outhouse or an out area for the water at the back. There was never any second building on this property, never ever, which means in actuality, if we were doing the right thing by the listed building, we would be looking to build nothing. And if anything, we would be looking to probably restore it back to a green garden, which was its intentional and original use. In 1875 or so, by the time we got to there, we had what is 2 Howard Street now that was added sometime during that time period, which was a single family home up until a few years ago, a very large single family home, but was converted about a year and a half ago maybe to an HMO. The building that is being proposed by the owner and developer is to actually mirror 2 Howard Street. Now, if I had my druthers, and if you know, the world were an airy-fairy made-up world of wonderful people and all this other stuff, I'm sure they had unlimited pockets. I'm sure they might also wish for a back garden in there. The fact is we are where we are, and this is a person that wants to try to extract some kind of profit on what's an otherwise difficult site. Their proposal of a 3-bedroom house will forever change the makeup of the understanding of 101 Oxford Road. 101 Oxford Road faces Oxford Road. I think you or someone else just referred to it as Howard Street, or someone referred to me today as Howard Street. Well, this is now going to be known as Howard Street. It'll probably have a Howard Street address. It's an Oxford Road address, and it is an Oxford Road building, and it is in curtilage that we will now never be able to understand again. I will jump off my soapbox about that because that's the last we will probably ever be able to understand about the reality of 101 Oxford Road and the Georgian style of building that it is. The proposal is adequate. The proposal addresses Howard Street appropriately. It addresses 2 Howard Street and the building next to it appropriately. If it were to be a what's the word? If it were to be an add-on or something like that, a set-in secondary kind of building, that is probably the building they would have built back in 1875 if they had continued building on down there. What I don't want to see is I do not want to see the trees being lost. I do not want to see any more of that high wall being removed than absolutely necessary, because again, this is all part of what makes 101 Oxford Road really special. We will, with the completion of this proposal, and there are environmental implications about asking for more trees and better biodiversity, which I would like to see carried out. We can have a more petite kind of garden that would be what actually had happened by the time they were utilizing the site in 1875. There's a little garden back there, behind there. So that would be a more petite and shrunken up version. So that's the reality of what we're dealing with today. As such, I have no other complaints. Would be my preference that this would not be granted a car parking spot as is laid out in here, but that, and so in other words, on my behalf, I'm happy with the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Hornsby-Smith.
I'd like to endorse what Councillor Rowlands has said. In many ways, she's delivered the detail, which is it's important for this committee to appreciate the historical context. I welcome the fact that there are conditions that prevent it being converted into a house of multiple occupation, and that it will contribute to being one of the 3-bedroomed properties that will be suitable for a family. We're much needed in Reading, and I think that's very welcome. The one concern I've got is that in 7.26 of the report, it discusses notifications to future occupants regarding parking permits. Now, if this had been liable to conversion to an HMO, I could quite agree that we would want to restrict parking permits. But this is a house that has got one large family and is no different, in my view, from any of the other older houses, apart from obviously architecturally and historically, that are on Howard Street. So it seems to me that it would be pernicious to remove a parking permit for a single family residence that is in addition to the properties in Howard Street. Now, I'm not going to labour the point, because I think Councillor Rowlands has made an eloquent case for why we have to move on, why we are supporting this application, and that it is making a positive contribution. But I would like to raise that concern that I have, that in future, that single family will be discriminated against by not having a parking permit, whereas elsewhere, where we've got HMOs or we've got blocks of flats, we have a much stronger policy, it seems to me, and it's much more justifiable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? No, not seeing anybody. So, oh, sorry, you just want your piece of paper back. Sorry, I thought you were indicating again. Right, so can I see all those in favour of the application being granted? Thank you. It's unanimous. Right, we then come on to item 11, which is the third Abbey application tonight, which is the Oracle department stores as were. And I believe Jonathan Markwell is going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Please know that there is a short update report for this item, pages 15 and 16 of your update agendas. So the proposal is seeking the removal of condition 62 of the original 1997 Oracle permission to enable the lawful subdivision of the existing House of Fraser and former Debenhams units into a number of separate units. This is considered to be acceptable subject to a number of new conditions. These include securing the future units to have a minimum floor space of 1,000 square metres and restricting the possible uses within the future units to 1, retail, 2, food and drink, mostly on the premises, 3, indoor
Sorry,
sport.
Jonathan, could you move your microphone a bit nearer? I think some members
So
are
3,
Thank you.
indoor sports and recreational fitness, or 4, medical or health services uses only, which are 4 component parts of the use class E. So the new conditions are considered to be necessary and relevant to protect the vitality and the viability of the town centre and guard against possible adverse amenity or transport implications not assessed as part of this application. A byproduct of this type of application submitted has meant that the 74 other planning conditions as part of the original 1997 permission are required to be referenced on any future decision notice. These conditions have therefore been revisited and are recommended to either be updated or removed as appropriate. As per the update report, a number of conditions have ongoing retention provisions, and presently a number of plans to confirm matters for inclusion on the future decision notice are awaited from the applicant. The recommendation is therefore to grant the application, with members delegating the assessment of these final plans to officers without future input from members. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gavin.
Sorry, Chair. Just rearranging the furniture. Thank you, Chair. I welcome this application. It seems to me that only yesterday, when the Oracle opened, is actually 26 years ago, and it is extraordinary how in those 26 years our shopping habits and the way that we purchase and the way that we select items has changed radically, and that throughout the country these large shopping centres seem now not to be able to sustain these large anchor stores. And I can remember the excitement of the Oracle opening and these 2 anchor stores either end of the Oracle, Debenhams one end and House of Fraser the other end. House of Fraser was the posh one, and but I think it reflects how we must move with the changing habits of consumers, because if we don't, then we're going to be left with dead space in a regional shopping centre. Do you remember that people travel to Reading to use the Oracle shopping centre from a large distance, and that we need to make sure that we keep it a vibrant and successful shopping centre and activity centre, so not just a shopping centre, I think, anymore. So I welcome this, and I also welcome the fact that the detail will have to come back to us. So I think what we're doing this evening, if I'm correct, is we're agreeing the principle that these stores can be subdivided with a minimum size of 1,000 square feet, so not into tiny little rabbit hutch type units, so substantial sized units, but that any details that would need to come back to planning, if I'm reading the conditions correctly, in order to, so for instance, condition 78, the remainder of the application should be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority. So I think we're going to be able to ensure that they are suitable things that move into this, into the Oracle. So yes, absolutely support this, and welcome the opportunity for new businesses to come into our town centre, which better reflect consumer demand. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Lang.
Yeah, it's just a comment. It's thank you for the report. Officer Markwell puts together his reports very comprehensively, and I find them easy to read. I think he's changed them slightly. He now explains the policy, puts the title in there, which helps me greatly anyway. It's a small point, but it's about. I'm always talking about ethos, aren't I? So it's condition 55 with the creche, and they call it CAB, Citizens Advice Bureau. It's now known as Citizens Advice Reading, and it says reason in the interest of the vitality of the town centre to ensure the town centre community facilities are appropriately located and to ensure that the development is accessible to all potential visitors, and they've kept that mostly in place apart from the creche. I know they've caveated it to the local plan, but it just shows the commitment to keep community facilities in the town centre at the heart of Reading and accessible to the public. I was just pleased with that condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Not seeing anybody, so can we move to the vote on this, please? Can I see all those in favour of this application?
Sorry, Chair. Just on the point that Councillor Gavin made, I just wanted to check.
Oh,
sorry, just as for clarification, just condition 78 says submitted to and approved by local planning authority, but that doesn't necessarily mean the committee, does it?
Oh, yeah, that's the intention, to come back to officers and there not being an automatic requirement for details to come back to committee.
So it might come to committee.
Or it could be called in if needs be, but there wouldn't be an automatic.
I just wanted to check that because Councillor Gavin seemed to be thinking it was coming back to committee.
But we would always, we would see those plans, and if we wanted to bring them back into committee for discussion, we would have the right to do that. So in that sense, we're not just saying, yes, anything can happen. They've got to go through a process of which elected members will see what is being proposed, will see an officer recommendation, and if they choose, could call it into committee for discussion. Yep. Thank you.
right, shall we try the vote again then? All those in favour of this application? Thank you, that's unanimous. And we go on to the last report this evening, which is in Whitley, on page 161. And I think, Jonathan, you're introducing this one as well.
Thank you, Chair. So please note again that there's another short update report for this item too. So plan permission is sought for the redevelopment of the site for a single industrial building for flexible industrial processes, general industrial or storage or distribution uses with ancillary offices. The continued use of an existing employment site within a core employment area location such as this for alternative employment uses is welcomed and supported. This is preferable to a residential use, which is possible owing to separate prior approvals at the site. A suitable standard of accommodation would be provided, increasing the employment floor space in overall terms at this brownfield site. Proposals are considered appropriate, and accordingly, plan permission is recommended for approval subject to a legal agreement and the conditions set out in the main report, barring alterations to the trigger point of one condition as per the update report. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Chair. I thought there was going to be a couple more than that. I was going to sum up. Thank you, Officer Markwell, for a good report. I'm pleased with this. It's obviously sits in my ward, Whitley ward, best ward in the world. So I don't know whether you remember the BBC interview we did on the Article 4. Me and Officer Warrenham. That was done outside. How could you forget? It was the one where I used the when was it? Mice in charge of the cheese, and that was the only quote they used, wasn't it? So anyway, the Article 4 seems to be coming up with the goods, because here we go. We got a core employment area. It's light industrial area, high employment. Lots of locals working down there. Got a fantastic new facility going up there, and of course it's now not going to be residential, which is a bonus for me. So that's it really. Well done, Officer Markwell. I'm really pleased with this. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else? Yeah. So I see all those in favour of this application? Thank you. Again, unanimous. Thank you very much. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.